Welcome to another Canvas specific this time live stream. I'm really excited because we've done a few of these over the last few weeks. It's really close to Christmas break for a lot of our educators and folks out there that are joining in the holiday season is just going to be absolutely fantastic. So not only am I excited about that, but I'm also excited to welcome Kristen Roberts, team lead and principal learning consultant with the Learning Services Department, to talk about leveraging outcomes in Canvas for higher ed. Now, outcomes are something that was very foreign to me when I first started teaching, but I was working in a career center where we were kind of doing both higher ed and K-12. So we were really diving into this idea of using not only standards, but not standards-based grading, but more of like outcomes and mastery. It really fits. So if you are out there in Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, all of the social media channels watching us today, and you know folks that have a higher education slant or focus, or learning about mastery and outcomes in Canvas is something that's important, please share this live stream with them, like, subscribe, and if you have questions or comments, as always, make sure you're questioning and commenting in the comment sections of these platforms. We're extremely blessed to have something that we'll be able to see those very quickly, show those on the screen, and allow Kristen to share her expertise with all of you out there in our audience today. So Kristen, thank you so much for being a part of the live stream. I missed my time over there in Learning Services with you all. You all do fantastic work. These are some of our most engaged sessions that we offer our Canvas customers. So I'm just super excited and blessed that you've decided to join us today to share outcomes in Canvas for higher ed.
Yeah, thanks, Eddie. And we miss you too, but we're so excited to see you on our Canvas Live days that we're able to talk to you and see you again. All right. Well, thanks, Eddie. I'm just gonna jump right in. He did introduce me to you all, so I do have an introduction slide, but I'm going to talk about this session really quickly. We are going to discuss how institutions can use Canvas to manage accreditation standards, competency-based learning, review techniques to implement program-level learning outcomes, to measure program individual student success, to satisfy those accreditation requirements that we have, and empower administrators with data. We're going to go over a few different institutions and how they use outcomes within Canvas at specific program levels. So I'm really excited to talk about those. First, Eddie did introduce me. I am Kristen Roberts. I am on the Learning Services team with Instructure. I will be here 3 years in January. I can't believe it's been 3 years already, but I'm so excited to be able to talk about outcomes. And like Eddie, before getting into education and to Canvas, I had no idea what these outcomes were, and now I feel like I'm talking about them every other week. So I'm super excited to bring them to you. Side note about me, I love dogs, sushi, sports, and warmer weather. Living in Florida, I get warmer weather, so I am very happy I am not in the freezing cold right now. But all right, let's talk about outcomes. What are they? So what are outcomes in Canvas? We often hear outcomes and how they relate to standards-based grading, and that might be one of our first things, and that seems very at that K-12 level, which is amazing, but we can definitely use it at that higher ed level too. So what are they? They are standardized measures to use to track competency or mastery in a course across a program. Outcomes can be used to align to assignments, quizzes, and discussions, and track students' development as they complete these activities. So as the instructor in a course, you have all the power to give students these outcomes and assess them on it. We're going to go over some of the best practices, how we align those outcomes, and basically just what they are today. So what are they? They're statements that describe knowledge and skills that learners will develop during a course or program. Think about what you're teaching. Think about what you're overseeing as an admin. Are there certain skills or ideologies that students have to learn, that they must master that skill or come close to mastery of that skill to be successful or to graduate, to move on from that course, from that program? There's probably some. So when we think about those, how are we tracking that students are meeting those? And we might be in that old school way of using a clipboard and marking off they've met that goal, they've not met that goal. But in Canvas, we have this called outcomes, where we can create those statements that are our program standards or competencies or how students get that accreditation. And then we could track them and keep that data and use that data for years to come. I know sometimes we'll have to look back on data, so we have that available for our students. So as I mentioned, as an instructor, you can add these outcomes directly at a course level. If these are program outcomes, though, I definitely recommend using it at the account level. So admin, anybody who's overseeing a program, you could work with your faculty to create these outcomes and put them in at the account level. And I'm going to talk about some of those benefits. That means that any instructor who's using those outcomes will be able to just pull them into their course, and they have them there to use to assess with their students already. They don't have to go in and each faculty have to create those same outcomes. It's kind of like that umbrella. At the very top in the admin area, you put those outcomes in at the course level. An instructor can pull them and put them directly into their course. And the best part is you get reporting options if you put it at the account level. If you put it at the course level, you'll still get your gradebook reporting, but at the admin level, you can't pull those reports in. So at that admin level, it's so great to have those reports. Multiple programs can use those same outcomes if they are using them. All the faculty members who are teaching on those outcomes will have those in their courses, ready to go to assess their students. So when we think about outcomes, what do we need to do? We need to figure out what we are assessing. We need to figure out what our outcomes are. As I mentioned before, most likely you have those statements that show students what they need to do to become accredited, or have those programs become accredited, what students need to do to pass this course or program, and what they need to demonstrate. So how do we need to write those out? What do those need to sound like? So we need to make sure we know what we're assessing, and they're probably grouped. And I'll talk about a couple institutions and how they do their own grouping in a minute. But we also need to determine our proficiency calculations. So every outcome is tied to a point value, and that point value is going to determine what we set as mastery. We can call this many different things. There's so many different facets when it comes to outcomes. I'm going to use mastery today just to keep it consistent, but as a program, you could determine and you get to customize all of the wording, all of the levels of those outcomes, and we'll dive into those too. And then you'll determine those proficiency. You'll import them through CSV. You can create them manually, but I will show you how a CSV file is so much more efficient and a lot easier to do into courses and to accounts. And then I said you can create them in your own course too. But we also need to learn how to assess them, and I'm going to dive into that. And how you assess them in your course are through rubrics and question banks right now. So the first thing I want to talk about is selecting a calculation method. We talked about what outcomes are, that they are those statements that students need to demonstrate mastery of. And now, how do we determine if a student has reached mastery of that? You'll set a score. As I mentioned, that all outcomes are set to a score. You will determine that wording. So let's say you have a few different levels. So maybe you have mastery, approaching mastery, not mastered, and then just not near it at all. What number is that mastery going to be set at? Typically, we'll set it at like a 5 or a 4, but then how do we determine if students mastered that? Because most likely we are assessing these outcomes more than one time in our course. So we want to make sure that we have opportunities for students to grow into these outcomes and to show growth of these outcomes. And that's all about what mastery grading is. So we want to see what type of method we can choose. Canvas gives us 4 different methods that we'll dive into right now. And typically in a higher ed setting, or even a post K-12 setting, there is something that will go with anything that you're already doing in your courses. So we need to determine how we determine mastery. And this is an example of what an outcome looks like when it comes to that scale. I was talking about those points value. So this one, they chose to use the word meeting, progressing, beginning, and total points. Right here, meeting is 5 points, and you choose this. You choose these words up here. You choose the points where students are mastering. You can even choose exceeding mastery. So they can go even beyond this mastery point right here. And then below here, this is where you choose that method. Because as I mentioned, you are going to most likely be assessing students more than once on these outcomes. So how are we going to average all of those up or count all of those scores up to determine if students have mastered that outcome? So our first one would be our decaying average. And this is what Canvas defaults to. With the decaying average, this calculation factors the average of all assessment items while weighting the most recent submission to any assignment associated with this outcome at a higher percentage. What that means is Canvas will take all of those items that students were first assessed on for this outcome. So let's say this outcome right here, students scored a 1, a 4, a 2, a 3, a 5, a 3. And then the last time they scored, they had a 6. So Canvas will thankfully do all of this math for us. They will average these numbers together, and then they will take the these numbers at 35%, and then the last number at 65%, coming in with that number of 4.95. And if we set our mastery level at 4, that means the final score is a 4.95, and students achieved mastery here. So this will take all of those and average it out and do all of that math for you, which is one for me. I was very thankful for that. But the great part is you don't have to settle for the 65-35. You can change it. You can make it 50-50. But it will take those first scores, average those out, and take the last scores and make sure it calculates that correct number for you. So this is the first way, and that's a decaying average. The other ways are far more easier to explain. The next one is n number of times, and I see this one very, very frequently when I'm working with institutions. That means you set that students need to receive a mastery score of 5 points, let's say 5 times. Once they hit that 5 times, they've mastered that outcome. So if they need to show mastery 5 times of it, they hit it 5 times, it becomes green for them, and they are good to go, and they have mastered this. The next one is the most recent score. Again, pretty self-explaining right here. The most recent score they've got, they receive that score. So for example, they get a 1, 4, 2, 3, students get that 3. And the last one is the highest score. So no matter when they were assessed, Canvas will take that highest score and give that as that mastery level. So 1, 4, 2, 3, they will take 4 because it's that highest score, and that's what that student received on that outcome right there. So that would be your next step in creating outcomes. First of all, you'll come up with your statements, and then you'll discover what your mastery level is. So you'll figure out your points value for everything. And then you're going to come up with your calculation method. So how do we determine when students master these outcomes? With those calculation methods, I wanted to dive in, and after we get this basic understanding of what outcomes are and looking into that calculation method, trust me, you are not going to learn everything you need to know about outcomes in this time that you're going to be sitting with me. But we can talk about how other institutions are using them, and maybe those will fit something that you are doing as you're teaching those courses or as you are overseeing programs. I love to talk about my clients and other institutions that I've worked with to give any ideas. I kept their names out, but institution number 1, and this is where me and my team, we see it most frequently used are within medical programs, specifically nursing. We see a lot of outcomes used in nursing for accreditation. This one institution that I work with, they're using it for their BSN program, and students need to show mastery of specific skills, and they will take these with them throughout the program. What this program did at their sub-account level of the nursing school, they put in all of their outcomes at this level, and the faculty then went in and pulled in those outcomes to their course. So they're all using the same pool of outcomes. And then the program facilitator goes into the account level and pulls the reports to see where students are when it comes to these outcomes. And that helps them with their accreditation processes too. So one of the examples was from their student learning outcome was students begin to relate to people as unique individuals, possessing worth, dignity, and potential for self-actualization. With this, what an instructor does with their students, they are in class or even in practicals, and are actually assessing students as they're demonstrating this. So whether they're submitting a paper to demonstrate how they know this, or they're actually in class and teachers are on either their app or their laptop and choosing that students are mastering this, and they do that through rubrics. So as simple as those rubrics as you make in your own courses, you just attach outcomes to that, and that will show if students are mastering that. They use the calculation method of the final score. So the last score that students get needs to be that mastery level for them to move on in their programs. Right. So I've seen this, and this is just this one, but there's tons of nursing programs out there that are using these outcomes, and it's really cool to see. Right. And this is an example. I was able to pull an example. I don't have their institution name on here, but this is what it looks like for them. So they put a 3-point scale. Satisfactory is at 3 points. So you see that at mastery, they chose the word satisfactory. Improvement needed, unsatisfactory, or not applicable. So this would show that mastery for students when instructors are using those rubrics to grade them. And you'll see that they use the latest score. And I thought this one institution using it was super cool. This was from a technical school, so post K-12 technical school, using competencies. This one was from an arborist electrician school, and I was just so excited to work with them. And they say they go out in the field and their students actually have to show that they can climb a tree, that they can tie knots. And it's been difficult for instructors because typically they'll go out with their clipboards, mark that students are doing this correctly. But now with these outcomes, they're able to go out with their mobile device, the teacher app. They're able to see their students perform these different competencies, like this first one. Students must demonstrate how to tie, dress, and set a taut line hitch, an English prusik, or a Blake's knot. I have no idea what these are, but they sure do. And they're able to go out in the field, go on the Canvas app, and identify whether students are mastering these skills or not. Another one was climbing. Like, students actually had to climb trees. I just thought this was so cool. They would have to climb those trees, and they would say if students mastered this or not. And students had to show this 2 times. So they chose the method of n number of times. And once students are proficient twice, they have mastered that skill, and they're able to move on to the next set of skills. And they only chose 2. I don't have a picture of this one, but they only chose 2 grading scales, either proficient or not proficient. So they only had really 1 point or 0 points, and they set that 1 point as mastery. But just a really unique out of the box way to use this. it's a great way for them to go back into their records too, to check if students are completing. And I love that they're doing it within Canvas because students have immediate access to those data points. Students get to see whether they've mastered those skills or not too, and they can keep track of their own learning in these types of courses. And then the third institution, and of course this one sits to my heart because it's an education program, and obviously we're all in education too. This institution is just starting out using outcomes for internship evaluations. So teachers have to go in, or students their final year have to go in and intern at different schools. So a student teacher must demonstrate knowledge of execution of differentiated activities within a classroom setting was one of their competencies or outcomes that they've created. What they've chose was exceeding mastery, mastery, approaching mastery, and needs improvement, and not applicable. So you can choose quite a few different points to assess students. And they've just needed students to get to mastery, but they love to share if students are going above and beyond. So they wanted to show exceeding mastery in these outcomes as well. The evaluating teacher will use a rubric to evaluate that student teacher during a visit to the internship site. And they use that decaying average as 50-50. And why I love this one, because they are using this to tie it back to education as well, as we're moving towards that mastery grading system and everything. So they're really teaching these student teachers what mastery grading looks like, as they're also using it in higher ed settings. So I thought this was a really great use of those outcomes in these programs. And those are just some 3 examples. If you're out there watching, I would love to hear more ways that you're using it as a program facilitator, as a faculty member. Go ahead. I know Eddie said that those chats are open. Share away how you're using those, because I would love to share this out some more too.
Yeah, Kristen, this is so good. I know that there are so many examples. I love that you've broken that up to show very specific examples of use cases on. Sorry. Oh no. That happened live. I can't edit that out. It was like I knew it was happening too. So I think that, just the opportunity that folks are going to have coming in here. I know when I was doing outcomes and mastery, a lot of that stuff was kind of manually inputted. Where do you suggest people start? Like, if they've never done it before, are there resources they can dig up? Are there things that are like, man, if I was doing it again, I know, like, if I were to do it over again, because I was doing a lot of manually inputting outcomes and standards, where would you suggest some folks start if they're just thinking about like getting involved in using these?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I can answer that in a couple ways too. So if you're just a faculty member wanting to use outcomes in your own courses as an instructor, I would definitely suggest going to our Canvas guides and searching, how do I import outcomes for a course? This is one of my, honestly, I go to the guides all the time, and this is one of the most used guides I use. In here, it will give you a CSV file where you can actually put your outcomes in that CSV file. Eddie, you mentioned that you are just typing in one by one. This CSV file is super helpful and will tell you exactly what to do, and actually has some really great just examples in it, so you can delete those, but you know where you could put them. But it tells you the steps to do it too, and how to upload them from that CSV file. So I think this is one of my favorite guides because it has that example of the outcome CSV file that will come in an Excel document, CSV or whatever your program.
Yeah, that CSV is super important for those that live the life of loving spreadsheets and loving what's the word? Somebody said it. Some data nerd said it to me the other day, and I was like, I don't even know what that word means. Concatenate or something like that. But the people that just live and die by those spreadsheets. There is a way to really format that, so you can take maybe something that's been provided from the state level or something that's been provided from, an institution level, and try to put those in the right columns and phrases and then import it so you don't have to do what Eddie did, which was, manually type in each one of these, which took a little while. Not going to lie. It took a little while.
Yeah, and it's a great thing about those CSV, you could just drop down if they're all those same proficiency ratings and everything. And
so great.
Even if,
Awesome. Well, Kristen, thank you so much for sharing. Again, such a good job. These folks that come in Learning Services, when we first started these live streams, we used to get a ton of questions. Now we don't get any questions because they're just so good. Like we have perfected, I think, finally the machine. As always, if you have comments, let us know. Obviously, Kristen and I are here to help. You can find us all over the place on Twitter or in these communities, Instructure community, or on the website. Be sure to check us out. But also Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, all of the places. Like, subscribe, retweet, do all of the things that you're going to need to do to make sure that folks that would really benefit from this information can see it. So we appreciate all of that. As always, keep checking all of these subscribe feeds. We've got more live streams coming up. But we really wanted to wish, this might be actually have one tomorrow with our partners, Turn It In, which I know is a huge, Turn It In is a big one, right? Like everybody's like, they're waiting. I'm excited to have them join the live streams tomorrow. But then after that, we might be in a little bit of a lull for the holidays. So we'll leave you alone until the new year. And we can't wait to offer some really great and exciting things happening on these live streams coming up. So stay tuned. Thanks again, Kristen, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Eddie. Thanks, everyone.